And it hits me, oh my gosh, this is that triangle.
You know, there's explanation for everything that occurred in the Rendlesham Forest incident that doesn't involve aliens at all.
It was completely silent. It comes right over our heads.
He saw a classic flying saucer really standing in the clearing.
He turned over to my father and held his hand, and he looked in his eyes and he said, "We're not alone."
Welcome to Podcast UFO for our live show. We're live every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Please remember to visit the website podcastufo.com for past episodes, blogs, and forums. During the show, feel free to participate live in our chat room. And don't forget to like us on our very active Facebook page.
Hello, and welcome to the show. This is Martin Willis, your host. And we're coming out at you live. Hang on just 1 minute. We're having just a little bit issue here. I'm going to Alejandro is just not connecting with him, and he is online, so there's something really weird going on, and we will try to see if he can connect to us. First of all, I have some tragic news for the show here, for us out there, listeners and everything, and that is and I don't want anyone to say anything about yesterday was my birthday. I don't like birthdays, so don't say happy birthday or anything like that, please. But anyway, I also shared my birthday with Andy Fleming, who you know from episodes of astronomy that he used to be on our show. He's done a lot of blogs. He was a amateur astronomer that saw a black triangle fly over him. That Andy, the great Andy, he passed away. I tried to reach out to him yesterday because we share that birthday. He has the same birthday as myself. I would like to dedicate this show. Alejandro, you there?
I am here.
Oh, my goodness, we're good to go, finally. So Andy Fleming, the gentleman that does astronomy clips for us, passed away, Alejandro, and I was just telling the audience that,
no.
Yeah, it was very, very sad. He was such an upbeat guy. The last time he did a clip for us, he was recording on his pool table with a blanket over him so he wouldn't get any echo. And he was a funny guy, a real family guy, and loved his dogs as well. So, Andy, you'll be very missed, and we are dedicating this show to Andy, and also with that everybody gets to listen to the whole full 2-hour show without paying, supporters and all. Everybody gets to listen to this show tonight. And our guest tonight, I met Israel Curiel in North Carolina 2 years ago, I think it was. Yes, 2 years ago. And it was kind of funny when he walked in the room, everybody knew him, and real nice guy, and I'm really looking forward to talking him tonight. But let's move forward, Alejandro, and what do we have for news this week?
We got, June was a record month for sightings from MUFON, which is kind of strange. In fact, I was hoping to get you this information before you talk to Peter Davenport to see if something similar happened with him. But this is kind of cool. So really, this year has not been that much higher than last year. In fact, I made a graph, and really only May has been higher than last year when it comes to MUFON as far as sighting reports. However, June just skyrocketed, which is really strange. Typically, MUFON gets about 400 to 700 reports. Last year, they had about 7,000 reports. But this June, they had something like over 1,100 sighting reports.
Wow. Amazing. So
yeah. So I contacted...
What's going on?
Yeah. The aliens are freaking out. They're all over the place. This is getting crazy. They're climbing around Well, actually, that's what I asked Jan Harzan, the director of MUFON, and Roger Marsh. And Roger Marsh got back to me, and of course, I talk to Roger Marsh on a daily basis because he writes for Open Minds about MUFON UFO cases. And he said he was pretty certain he knew what it was. And he said that was most likely due to Hangar 1. The second season of Hangar 1 ended in June. They had 2 episodes in June, although it's been going for the last few months. So I'm a little surprised that, it's only June that had such a huge increase. But that's what they think it was. They think the last 2 episodes in particular focused on sightings from MUFON files that they think were really cool, and they think that inspired a lot of people to call in. He has a little bit of evidence of this. Well, when I ran the numbers, I also ran it, and I think this kind of plays for his theory as well. I ran it against the states, so I took all of the different states to look at the sighting reports they've had to date, and to see if one state had more than the rest. And it was all kind of relative. So they all had slight increases, really. No one state had the most, big spike. And also, he took a look at the files, and he found that the files were mostly anecdotal historical sightings, which makes sense. So a lot of people sitting around watching TV, and they see the show, and they're like, hey, I had a sighting a few years ago, a few months ago, or even a few weeks ago. I had to call MUFON and tell them about it. And so they went online and they reported them. So these are stories that go, all the way back to the 60s up to present day. So pretty interesting.
Wow. Now, what Peter did mention last week was, and I was kind of shocked to hear this, and he thinks that it's 1 out of 20,000 sightings get reported. And, here's a guy that's been working with these numbers for 21 years, I think it is. So, he's really got a handle on what's going on. And now I'm not sure if that he meant by that what gets to the completion of a written report, because that was the issue. Many people would call in, but most people did not want to go through the effort of writing a report about it. And for many, he said it would take a whole show to tell all the excuses that he hears.
Yeah, right. And I hear them a lot, too. What's funny is even when you go to MUFON meetings and someone said, I saw something. Well, did you go to the site and report it? Nah. And you hear that a lot. So 1 out of 20,000, I think that's kind of a shot in the dark, but I think that it is a large number, so it may be very near what he's saying. But I think he's right in that a very small fraction of reports are listed, because really, who knows that you can report them?
That's
or
right.
Who you would report them to? A lot of people will call the local news station, and the local station may take a note of it and may do something with it, may not. Luckily, some news stations are familiar with their local MUFONs and will send them to their local MUFON group. But I agree that the vast majority of reports are not reported. And what's exciting about that is, a fraction of these that are investigated, they can't determine what they are. And these are reported by very, very credible people. So I think it is really mysterious. What's kind of cool, too, is my story really got picked up by UK newspapers. I haven't seen one U.S. newspaper that's written about it, actually, but several of the big UK newspapers out there picked up the story.
Yeah, just because I got a little discombobulated in the beginning of this show, I just want to say that this show is live, 100% live, and if you'd like to jump in the chat room now, if you're listening live, go to podcastufo.com. It's right on the homepage, real easy sign-in. And so what else is going on this week?
Oh, well, some of these stories, actually. I was in Roswell, so I was pretty busy for the last few days. I just got back Monday night, so I've been swamped, of course, but I was gone Friday through Monday. So I haven't done a lot of writing other than actually this story about these sightings in June was my last story. But Roger's written a lot of stories, and he's written about some of those historical sightings that have been reported to them lately. For instance, this one's really interesting, and this one happened in 1994, and a gentleman said that he was working at the Newport Chemical Depot when in Indiana when he had a really strange sighting. He said he noticed a dim light in the distance. It seemed to be above the ground level and about tree line. So they stayed in their vehicle and they watched this thing He said it was really dark out and that the craft got larger, it seemingly, I guess, getting closer, and it appeared to be like a glowing globe with other globes of lights on the corner. In fact, he drew a drawing that we just posted today that Roger just got a hold of. We kind of did an update with some more information about this really cool sighting. So people will have to take a look at that. Another one of the sightings that he wrote about was one in Alabama. Now, this person recalls this in 1966, but pretty shocking. I mean, this person said that he had just moved to Huntsville, Alabama, so it was sometime in 1966 or 1967, and they noticed what seemed to be steam escaping from a rocket testing tower located on the Redstone Arsenal, and there's a lot online about this tower because it's been used for testing rockets and things like that. He got his binoculars and took a look because it looked like there's this big disc there. He said it looked like a disc that was about that was at a 45-degree angle and about 1/2 to 2/3 the size of the tower, which is incredible because this thing looks like it's at least 50 feet tall or something. I don't know. It's a huge rocket tower. He said when he did get his binoculars to look at it, the object was gone. So a really weird sighting. And when you see the pictures of the tower, to think that this thing was half the size of the tower, It must have been humongous. So some neat sightings that have come from this spike in June reports that presumably comes from the Hangar 1 television show.
Well, whatever can get out there to, give people an idea how to report something, I think is a great thing. And I think that, that will keep even more coming as we go along. Now, which sighting was it that looked like the big walnut that's in this story? It kind of looks like the JAL 1628 incident, over Alaska.
That was the 1994 sighting that was over the Newport, Indiana chemical facility, chemical depot. Yeah, that's where that sighting went. So this guy said it was huge.
It looks like the walnut thing that the Japanese pilot drew way back when that incident happened in 1987, I think it was.
Yeah, that's true. It does look very similar. And this thing, he says, was about probably 300 to 350 feet wide. So pretty huge object, according to this witness. So, yeah, pretty cool sighting. This one actually was thoroughly investigated as well. And the field investigator, Ned Delaney for Indiana MUFON, closed it as an unknown. So that means, he was not able to figure out any sort of man-made or mundane object that might have been seen.
Right. Now, you can check out all these stories in the show notes. There's links to openminds.tv. All the stories are there. Also, I wanted to tell you that I really enjoy your Open Minds UFO report on YouTube.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Yeah.
Looks like you must put a whole week of work at least into that.
Well, we put most of the work in the stories themselves that we're writing on a daily basis. So then we pull from those and cut those. We do, but it does take a week to produce because we usually will film those on a Tuesday. And then Michael, our video editor, he will then take the rest of the week to edit that. Usually gets it done on Thursday and we get it ready and then post it on Friday morning. So, yeah, it's a week's worth of work for him. And Michael Klein, I think he's extremely talented. He does all of that video work, all of those graphics and everything all on his own. So pretty cool stuff.
Well, I was talking earlier about North Carolina. Is he the gent that I met down there? Has he been with the Open Minds for a while? He's someone new.
That was a guy named Tom Ruffin who used to work for Entertainment Tonight. He actually went to go work for a local television show. It's a show that it's called The List, I think, and it's syndicated all over the country, but it's shot here in the area. But Michael was kind of working as helping him out for a while and then came on full time. And Michael has taken on the workload himself, but he's continued to do a great job. But, yeah, North Carolina was a different fella, Tom Ruffin. And you might have met Michael at the conference, but he's always backstage. So he's always back there, pulling the levers and pushing the buttons and help make everything work.
Just like the Wizard of Oz. Hey,
just like the Wizard of Oz.
We have a question for you, Alejandro, up on the message board.
Okay.
And do you have anything new from Don Schmidt at Roswell?
I've had a few people ask me that, and no, I do not have anything new. Actually, I didn't have the nerve just to go up and ask. I know that both of them, Tom Carey and Don Schmidt, are a bit they're not real happy about how everything's gone down. Not that, luckily, we're able to say hi, give hugs, because Don and I especially, are good friends, known him for a while, even through all of this rough stuff. But, as far as I know, no one asked them for a status of their opinions. I did sit into part of a panel, but I had to run, and it was mostly, they were just starting to get into just the very the minutia coming in about Roswell and the basics, because a lot of people that go out there, they don't know much about ufology or anything. They're just kind of people from all over the world coming out to check out the festival and everything. So I have not heard that they referred to it at all, and unfortunately we were both so busy that I never got a chance to sit down with them. And of course I was planning to ask. So was my girlfriend. She was really curious. She's also friends with Don, and she wanted to she said as soon as she got a chance she wanted to ask. But we never got the chance. It was just too busy. And we had to run. But I went Vine crazy. People should check out my Facebook, because if you know what Vine, they're those 6-second videos. Yeah. So I got a lot of really cool videos from Roswell, including Daryl Sims doing a yeehaw on top of a Segway, which is a pretty funny one. But lots of cool stuff there.
All right. Well, hey, thanks so much. And
yep, thank you.
All right. And we'll catch you next week, Alejandro.
Talk to you next week. Say hi to Israel for me.
I sure will. Okay, hang in there, everyone. And just a reminder, Art Bell will be coming back on this station just in about 2 weeks. I believe it's July 20th. So get ready for that. That should be fun. Hang in just 1 second right after the quick little music clip, and we'll be right back with Israel Curiel. Israel Curiel, how are you?
Good. How are you, Martin?
Great to have you back on. I had forgotten that you were actually on the show for like 5 minutes way back 2 years ago. Just a little brief hello, and I was interviewing a bunch of people, and all of a sudden something dawned on me the other day, and I took a look and I go, my God, he's been on. You've also listened to a lot of the shows, and I really appreciate your doing that.
Yeah, I truly value what you're doing. I just think that we need to reach more of the general populace, and the more avenues they have for learning about ufology, the further we can get in just bringing this to the general general populace understanding.
Sure, it kind of goes along with what Alejandro was just talking about with. Hangar One, you hear a little, mixed reviews about the show, but still, when it creates, awareness for people that otherwise may not think twice about it, or, a good point he said is a lot of people, including myself years ago, had no clue about how to report something. So it's all good.
No, absolutely. Even today, I want to go into the conversation a little bit more, but because of Hangar One, we are getting historical cases, and typically North Carolina gets about 16 to 17 cases a month. In June, we had 30, and this month we are already at least one case a day, so well ahead of our average. And I believe a lot of it had to do with the Hangar One show.
Wow. Well, you mentioned earlier that you got the word out that you're going to be on the show tonight, and it looks like we have a lot of listeners on the radio network listening. So good job, thanks.
Yeah. Is there a way that you see that? How many?
Yeah,
people?
The producer just shot it over to me. But I also want to say that if someone is listening live, you are welcome to jump in the chat room, and you're welcome to jump in the chat room at podcastufo.com and ask Israel a question. Also, we're going to take calls, and write this number down if you would, if you'd like to call in and ask a question. Also, if you wanted to say something about Andy, you're welcome to, Andy Fleming. You're welcome to do that as well. And that number is 603-967-4030. That's 603-967-4030. You're welcome to call in hour one, hour two, doesn't matter. And so, first of all, before we get into your whole background and everything, why, when you walked into the room down in North Carolina, did everyone get so excited and run up to you?
Well, I don't know about everybody got excited, but because I have been a MUFON investigator and the public relations director for MUFON pretty much from the start of my involvement with MUFON, and I became an investigator in May of 2011 along with Lakita. At the time, we had gone through a little bit of let's say, organization changes in North Carolina, and Stephen White had come over from Tennessee to help us restart our chapter here. So I've got a background in technology, and Stephen had asked me to try to set up a website and try to give people a way to connect to MUFON. And since then, we try to hold a meeting every 2 months to at least every 3 or 4 months in North Carolina. At this point, I keep track of all our stuff on our website, and we've had over 20 events throughout different cities in North Carolina, and we typically get an attendance of 40 to 60 people. And I'm really proud of that fact, because when I talk to other state directors, they always have it tend to have it in the same city, and you have a small group of people that keep going to all events. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure that that's really the best way to at least fulfill this position as a public relations director. I want to, and that's a funny thing. I mean, I've spent my life working around marketing and IT, and I'm using this website to the full potential. I've got a large email distribution list. And on top of using the technology, we're going to places where people can, come and see us and meet us and talk to us, and more importantly, share their stories. And these 20 different meetings that we've had in North Carolina, you cannot imagine how many stories we've heard. Lakita and I have been doing this since 2011, and if we have 40 to 60 people show up in every meeting, it's guaranteed that the 2/3 of the people there have UFO sightings, if not far more involved, or they're experiencers.
Uh-huh. So, now, are these people that are actually members of MUFON? They must be to get the notification.
No. Now, that's where my IT background comes in. Becomes very useful. I actually pay and use Google Adwords. So anybody in North Carolina, and I can go into Google Adwords and say, if you live in North Carolina, I want UFO links to come to me. Mm-hmm. So I have actually spent my own personal money to look for keywords like UFOs or orange orbs. And if somebody in North Carolina is searching for that, they're going to find me. So they'll come to our website, and that's how they find us. In North Carolina, I believe that we currently have 98 MUFON members, and I don't know. I think that over the last 4 years now, we've met 1,200 people, maybe.
Wow. So, are you also an investigator yourself?
I am.
I
am.
Okay, so if you have 98 members, how many would you say are investigators?
That's the funny thing. North Carolina is not the biggest state as far as populace, but I think we're somewhere between 16 and 19 investigators. I think that's a pretty big number for, the size of our state. Mm-hmm. And right now, I just spoke to Lakita this afternoon, Lakita being the state director, and she's had a handful of more requests to become new investigators.
Wow, that's great. That's great. So let's talk a little bit about your background. It's always an interesting story how someone gets, hooked on this topic and, actually goes as far as you have in this field. So what happened and what made you interested in this?
Well, and I'll tell you what, even before I give you my origin story, I kind of want to talk about my professional career so that it kind of plays a part. Hopefully it established some credibility for me. Sure. I've always worked in big financial institutions. For the big banks, I've historically done web application development. I did a lot of programming. Most of my career has been around the marketing of financial products. And I have recently, over the last 10 years, moved into a lot of trend analytics, doing some statistical work with a product called SAS, which stands for Statistical Analysis Systems. So that was kind of my impetus to find out more about MUFON. That kind of attracted me to MUFON. So that's a little bit about my professional background. How did I even start at ufology? It actually started for me in 1990. I was still in high school. I had gone to visit a friend of mine, and she said, Israel, I have to tell you something. And I'm like, okay. She said that she had grown up on a farm in Kansas, and that when she was about 10 years old, her and her mother had been walking through a field, and while they were out in the field, they were chased by UFOs. And her mother was so terrified that she took her in a car, left the farm, abandoned the husband, and left the state. And they never went back.
That can be convenient sometimes, but, wow.
Well, so I'm 17 at the time, and I'm thinking, number one, you're crazy, and number two, you scared the hell out of me. And let me tell you, I never spoke to her again. She had scared me that much. Wow. And I can't tell you how guilty I feel now. It's taken me a long time to I guess get the facts about ufology. So that happened in 90. Then around 98, I had found out that my uncle, who's a dentist and also a professor of dentistry at one of the largest universities in Mexico, him and my aunt in 91 had a UFO sighting in broad daylight, along with hundreds of other people on a Mexico highway. And they said they saw this large orbs, or a handful of large orbs in broad daylight going over the highways. I mean, in Mexico, you're talking, 20 million people. So there was at least hundreds of people that were seeing these. And it took my uncle, he's a pretty straight-laced guy, a dentist. It took him, 8 years to let my aunt admit it to anyone. So needless to say, between that high school event, my aunt and uncle who saw that, and even the summer after that girl had told me her story, I found the book Communion.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I read Communion when I was in high school, and I can't tell you, it really scared me. I distinctly remember thinking, this is not possible. I mean, this can't be real. So anyway, in 98, when we had found out that story, my mom also told me a separate story that I had grown up in Houston, Texas, and my mom had a friend at the time in Corpus Christi. She had come to Houston, and she had gone and see the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind. She came over, and her and my mom were close friends, and she was bawling, and she was in hysterics. And she said, "What happened? What happened?" And she's like, "Well, we were never going to say anything, but me and my girlfriends had been driving between Houston and Corpus Christi, and we've seen those crafts. We saw the crafts from the movie over the highway, and we never told anybody. But I went and saw the movie, and that's what we saw." Huh. So at that point, I'm in my mid-20s, and I mean, it kind of really shocked me. At the time, I didn't admit to anybody that I'm into UFOs and aliens. I mean, I had been reading about it, but it's something I kind of, that's something I did on my spare time. I wouldn't admit to it back then. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of the impetus for my interest in the subject.
Now, do you have any problem admitting that now in mixed company?
No. Not anymore. As a matter of fact, some of my coworkers from the bank should be listening to the radio show right now. I only feel comfortable explaining it to my involvement to my coworkers after they are aware of my technical capabilities. So once they know that I'm very capable of the job I perform, then I'm willing to share everything I do with ufology. Like a
credibility type of thing? Is that what
I have to establish? Yeah, I feel like I have to establish my credibility in the professional world before I expose you to, I guess, the craziness.
Yeah. I'm in the fine arts, antiques, auctions, and all that. So I'm very careful when it comes to that. I don't talk about it much. However, I did have a fellow auctioneer call me one night and say he enjoys listening to my show. I actually had him on the show, but. And there's also a couple of people that are on TV in the antiques world that also have had sightings and have listened to the show in the past, which I think is pretty interesting. But I understand exactly what you're saying. And luckily, I'm involved in a startup right now, and everyone there knows that I'm into it. And, occasionally some of them listen. So it's good that you can, it's kind of like coming out of the closet about UFOs is kind of what it is.
Right. And for me, I feel like I've found my purpose. And it really is to provide people an avenue, a way to talk about this and to learn about this field. Like you and Alejandro were just talking about, the cases that we receive are only the tip of the iceberg. Point in case, one of my starting questions at every meeting that we go to, I say, first of all, who here has had a UFO sighting? And almost every meeting, I would say three-fourths to 90% of the room will raise their hand. But then when I say, okay, out of these people who've had these sightings, who's actually reported it? Maybe one or two hands go up.
Yes.
Most people do not report their cases. Mm-hmm. And see, now I just went online and checked how many cases I have logged in MUFON, and I have officially investigated 57 cases. I can tell you, because of our local meetings, that we've heard of 12 to 1,500 additional sightings that are not in the MUFON database. And we're always asking people, please go to the MUFON site, log your sightings, because that information is very valuable. I mean, I've made my living around data. I know the importance of data and doing trend analytics. I want to see every report of these UFO sightings. I mean, that's really valuable information. And we're kind of missing the boat when these people are not going to the website and logging their sightings.
I was just going to get into how can it be possible to make it any easier for someone? But, I never reported my sighting. When I started the show, I realized that, there are places to report. But before that, I had no idea. But I have heard, now you can correct me if I'm wrong, but that you can report a sighting that happened even years ago. Is that so?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, like Alejandro was saying, the reports that we're currently getting are historical cases The one I currently got assigned over the last couple days was of a man and his wife who saw a UFO very, very close to him. I mean, they were less than 100 feet from him. It looked like it landed, and it happened in the early 90s. I think that the show Hangar 1 has, I don't want to say emboldened them, but I think people are starting to feel more comfortable sharing their stories, their experiences, as they see, the subject of UFOs on, in the media, in news reports, in these TV shows that are extremely popular. And, I mean, it's in all aspects of our life. I can't tell you how many times we'll see aliens in commercials or kids' toys or Mars Needs Moms. I mean, it's everywhere. And I think that as time progresses, more people are feeling more comfortable talking about it. I have spoken to pilots that have UFO sightings, and they say, look, we don't talk about it, but when me and my buddies are drinking, or when pilots are among friends, they'll share their stories. Even within volunteer organizations, I hear from one of the most interesting stories I heard was from a private jet pilot. Private jets fly apparently at a much higher altitude, and he says he's out there and he is. Let's see, if commercial jets fly at 35,000 feet, private jets fly at 45,000 feet, and he often will see the lights above them, and he says that generally there shouldn't be anyone above them other than military crafts, and it doesn't look like they're military crafts because they have they're moving in irregular patterns. So, I mean, they see them all the time.
Wow. Well, we have a question up on the message board, and that is, who is your favorite researcher and why?
Wow, my favorite researcher.
That's yourself.
No. It's funny because I kind of feel bad because I don't have the time to dedicate to this. I don't have enough time to dedicate to this subject. This is so important. Honestly, I would have to say John Ventura. John Ventura? Mm-hmm. Yes, I think
Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania, yes. Just because he has brought MUFON to the general public. He has just exposed more people to the subject and made MUFON not necessarily a household name because most people don't really know about MUFON yet. But he is starting to – he got the ball rolling. And that's why he's one of my preferred investigators. It's going to take more people reaching out to those outside of our field. Right.
I think I said that question wrong. I'm going to the person corrected me. But before I go back to that, can you walk us – this is another question up there. Can you walk us through a typical investigation from the initial report to the end finding?
Sure. So typically a report comes in through MUFON. Our state director receives all the reports, and she assigns it to now one of our 15 or 16 case investigators. So I typically try to reach out to the witness within the first 72 hours. I frequently just try to send them an email the same day and try to call them within the next 2 days. And then from there, I talk to them and try to get as many details as possible. We have a really long form that I try to fill out, which includes obviously the date, time, weather conditions, how close or how far they were from the object, how many witnesses, how many additional people can corroborate the sighting. To me, that is the most important thing. Because you do have a lot of people that will go out and say, oh, yeah, I saw this light far in the sky that was moving erratically. but nobody else saw it. I'm like, that doesn't really help me. It could have been a star. They could have confused it. I mean, so stars look like they twinkle, and you might think it's actually moving when it's not. But when you have people that file cases with multiple witnesses, that's when it gets interesting. So frequently, if there is more witnesses, I'm talking to witness number 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 or 5. I want to make sure that I talk to everybody. And if it's something more spectacular, I will sometimes try to call the local police department and say, "Hey, did you get any UFO sighting?" I try not to start out with UFO sightings. I'll try to say something like, "Did you get any strange reports of light in the sky or a plane burning or anything strange on such and such a date?" And needless to say, they'll say, "Oh, you mean like UFOs?" I'm like, "Yes, UFOs." And they'll laugh and like, no. So that doesn't work too often. But the more details I get from the witnesses, if I can corroborate it somehow, I look up I go to Weather Underground to check out what the weather was like, what the wind direction was like, and catalog, write that all down into the case in our case management system. But then there are some cases where we have experiencers. And then that's a whole nother ball of wax. Obviously abductions is a big part of the ufology field, and it's obviously controversial. Mm-hmm. I have to step back for a second, and I got to tell you, when I became a member or an investigator in 2011, I got into ufology because I'm thinking, there's got to be a logical explanation. There's no way that this is really happening. That I had read that there was tens of thousands of people having UFO sightings annually. I'm like, that's just a huge number. And I'd also done plenty of reading when there was hundreds of people claiming abductions. I'm like, no, there's no way. Before I became investigator, I said, I want to meet at least 5 people who've had UFO sightings and at least 1 abductee. You've heard the expression before, be careful what you ask for, you just might get it. Needless to say now, I've easily heard 1,200 to 1,500 UFO sightings. And at this point, I've got to be somewhere between 60 and 100 abductee heard from 60 to 100 abductee cases. Wow.
Well, you mentioned earlier about, you feel like sometimes you can't give it the time. And I really enjoy doing this show, and it does take, there's a lot of work involved in it. But I absolutely love doing the show. But a lot of times I get, like for instance, this Paul, if you happen to be listening, has been trying to reach me to tell me about his UFO sighting. And sometimes it's really difficult to take the time to listen to a story. Like Peter Davenport said the other last week that, he only wants to hear a couple of minutes and then he wants them to fill out a report. So I know I'm getting a little off topic here, but when someone contacts me, I would probably be better off trying to steer them into making a report. Wouldn't you say?
I'm sorry. I'm actually reading some of these comments. Repeat your question.
Okay. Be nice to Israel. He's reading you on the chat room.
You know what? Here's what I tell my friend, my buddies in the financial world. You're not going to believe this until you've seen them with your own eyes. I've actually had 2 sightings now. It was so difficult for me to believe this was even real. That's why I got into MUFON. I wanted to know that this was real. And when I came on and Stephen White was giving me these cases, and I'm starting to hear, he had told me about his personal sightings, and then I'm getting all these cases of people having close UFO sightings. It really upset me. It scared me. And one night I remember calling Steve. I said, Steve, is this real? I mean, this is really happening because we're getting so many cases. I'm like, I thought that there was people were just confused about what they're seeing, but this is really happening. Someone had asked, have I actually investigated cases? Yes, I've actually investigated. I have documented 57 cases in MUFON. I have heard 1,200 to 1,500 cases, of which I'm asking our attendees at these meetings, go and log your case at MUFON. Do they? No.
Do any of them?
Very few. Mm-hmm. So let's say, so here, last month in June, we got 30. At the next meeting we'll do it on August 12th, I assure you there'll be another 60 people there, and another 40 people will say they had a UFO sighting, and maybe one has actually reported it. So again, there are so many people having UFO sightings, they're not reporting it. Number one, I'm thinking more because they don't want the ridicule factor. They don't want to be bothered. They don't want to be judged.
Right. Mm-hmm. Okay. I totally get that. Get that. So you can actually see you're actually on the message board, so you can see the questions. If you'd like to answer them directly, that's fine, or I can throw them at you.
Well, I can't talk and read at the same time. So
okay. All right. The question up there is of the abduction cases, are you convinced that they are truly abductees?
Yes. And let me tell you why. So now that I've been doing this for over 4 years, cooperation is a very, very important piece of, I think, the cases that we investigate. Obviously, some of these cases are really far out there. The most credible cases that I find are when many, many people in a family are affected. I'll go ahead and share a little bit of one family that lives in the North Carolina mountains. The father had contacted me about 2 years ago, and he was desperate and scared for his teenage daughter. She had been at a friend's house, and being teenage girls, they stayed up all night, and she fell asleep around 5 o'clock in the morning, got up at 8 o'clock, came home, and then she discovered, as she's undressing, she is covered in bruises. I mean, bruises on her wrist, on her back, on her torso, on her legs, everywhere. And she was scared. She was terrified. And she told her dad, "Dad, I have no idea where this came from. I don't know where this came from." And the dad had already known about past situations. The little girl, when she was at that point, I think she was 16 or 17. She had grown up always talking about the lights outside of her window. She was really scared to sleep in her room alone because she always saw the lights outside of her window. So he came with me with that starter case, or that instance. And as I talked to him more, I found out that he had had multiple sightings as a teenager when he was growing up. And this is a teacher of physics at a high school. And he remembers one situation when he was a teenager that he saw a UFO. He had been riding home on his bike, and he saw a UFO, and he watched it for a few minutes, and then he went on home. When he got home, his parents were furious at him. And they're like, "Why are you mad at me?" He says, "You've been gone for like 3 or 4 hours." He didn't realize that he had missing time. So as I stayed in touch with him, he later shared with me his neighbor, who'd lived maybe a couple hundred yards away, is a good old countryman. He had set up a game camera to take pictures of deer in his field. Well, this very country man had went and got his game camera out, and at the time this was still, I think it was still film. He developed the film, and on the film he has what looks like a dark shadow of a being floating over the field. And he had given it to my witness, and he said, "Look, I don't know what it is, but I wanted you to have this because I know that strange things have happened to his household." And so he's passed me the photo. I've scanned it. And I sent him back the original. That was just another thing to add to his growing body of evidence. I asked him to find out from his family members if anyone else in his family had sightings. Sure enough, his brother has also had sightings. And one of the scariest things is just last Christmas, he had his brother, his sister-in-law, a couple teenage girls, and other family people in the house. And they had all gone to bed. It was around Christmas time. And around 3 o'clock in the morning, they all heard what sounded like a car hitting the side of the house on the second story. And he says that his brother was so scared, it woke the brother up, it woke the wife up, and the sister-in-law up. Everyone woke up, and they were so scared. But they're like, okay, let's go back to sleep. It scared them, but for some strange reason, everyone went back to sleep.
Well, I have to interrupt you just for one moment because I was listening to an interview with Jack Weiner from the Allagash incident, and something I had never heard of in that particular incident when they all, thought that they didn't realize they actually had missing time. They all went back. They had just seen the UFO, and they all went right to sleep.
Yeah, well, and this is only one example. I have there's plenty of other examples. So anyway, now I know that from what I've understood, I understand that these things, these abduction experiences, don't happen to a single person. It happens to your family lineage. The families that I've dealt with frequently have the parents, the grandparents have had sightings, and the children will have sightings. So when I talk to many people in a family and they all had UFO sightings or missing time, or they wake up with bruises, or one lady woke up and she's got what she thinks were laser burns at the base of her spine. And she'll send me pictures, and sure enough, it looks like a perfectly circular burn mark on the base of her spine. Those are the most compelling cases to me.
Right. Now, as a MUFON person, are abductions considered on any type of fringe? Is it okay to talk about these type of things among other MUFON investigators? I've heard a little bit about that in the past. That's why the question.
I think many people are still intimidated or scared of talking about it because it's a lot to take in. The implications, if this is real, the implications are far-reaching. Mm-hmm. Because I've had so many people come up and tell me about them, or even when we're at our meetings, people will come over and ask me to step aside, and they will break down and cry and tell me that they've had abductions since they were small children, and they've had nobody to tell because no one's going to believe them. Well, they can come to our meetings, and I'm not going to judge people because these people have these amazing stories, and there's so many shared traits among the cases I'm hearing. Another example was from a gentleman who was a foreman or a manager at a manufacturing plant on the East Coast of North Carolina. So he works at a large chemical plant, and he's also a volunteer fireman. And he was telling me that he had gone camping one day, and it was late at night. He had his dog with him, and he looked at his clock. It was 10 o'clock at night, and he was going to stay out till midnight. As soon as he got out of the car, he saw a UFO. And within a couple of seconds, this UFO is shining what he described like a spotlight, but he said it looked more like a material had come down. It was more than a spotlight. It had some texture to it. The spotlight had pointed into the trees, and he said it had scared him so much. He watched it for a second, and then it took off. He ran back in the truck, got his dog, and got him in the truck, and he's getting ready to leave, and he's looking at the clock, and it's after 1 a.m. And it scared him. Wow. It scared him, and who's he going to tell? He can't tell anybody. But he had seen the website, and he called me up, and he told me the story. And this is he's just a good old country boy, a man who works as a foreman or a manager at this manufacturing plant, and he goes hunting. I mean, there's no reason he wants to make something like this up. I mean, he didn't want me to enter it into – he didn't really want it logged anywhere. But he shared the story with me, and I mean, I get a lot of cases like that. People will call me up, or people will take us aside at the meetings and share these incredible stories with us.
There's a question up on the message board, and does MUFON ask what blood type people that are claiming they're abductees? I mean, does actually MUFON do reports of abductees?
Yes, yeah, we do. But you know what? Actually, that's a very good question. I need to start tracking the blood type of these people. But I don't necessarily think it is something like blood type. It just – I see, this is just my opinion. But it just seems that there are certain family lines that were picked from what I've heard from these cases. It seems like they at least started it at the early in the 19th century, even late 18th century, and they follow these family lines. I don't know that there was anything special if somewhere in, I don't know, 100 years ago, this family line was picked, and they can't continue following them.
Now, I've never really heard of early cases. Are you aware of early cases, or can someone actually research this?
So, see, what I tell you is coming from the cases that I have investigated, from the stories that my witnesses have shared with me. The oldest case I've heard of was from a retired military woman. She worked. Let me make sure I remember this. She worked in something like Air Force routing of planes. So she had top secret clearance in the military. So she had retired from the military, and she had UFO sightings all her life. And as I got to know her and she felt more comfortable with me, she would tell me more stories. She told me that when her grandmother was a child, so maybe in the 1920s or 1918, I think she said, her grandmother, they had just started hearing about airplanes, and she thought they were airships. The grandmother remembers seeing a tube-like craft in the sky when she was a very young child, maybe 10 or 12. And yes, there was Zeppelins at the time, but I'm pretty sure she was from Kentucky. I'm not sure that there was Zeppelins flying around in Kentucky in, 1918. So her family had seen them across multiple generations. So you have a grandmother having UFO sightings. The mother, who was at that point, she's in her 60s, and her daughter had originally thought that her mother was crazy until she started having sightings. And sure enough, I'd called the daughter, and at first she was totally dismissive of this. And a couple weeks later, she actually had what she thought was her first sighting. She called me back after she saw one of the orange orbs. And I kept in touch with this family for a couple of years. And it later turned out that the son, a teenage boy of like 17, had also had UFO sightings along with his girlfriend. So that I'm telling you about are all because of my witnesses' testimonies.
Right. Well, Matt brought up earlier about the Rh negative, and that does seem to be a commonality with a number of people that have been guests on this show that question's been posed to. So that would be interesting if there was somehow some type of connection with that. Speaking of that, have you looked at the commonalities that these people talk about?
Yes. So let me share with you some of the most common traits that I hear. I mean, obviously, a lot of them will describe the short grays, and it's really funny because I'll hear this from people that don't know anything about ufology. I mean, this oftentimes is like their first time they have even looked at the subject. They'll call us, and something scary has happened, and they wanted to reach out and try to get more information. So they'll describe the short gray people, autistic girls in one family. Talks about the doctors, the little white doctors come through the walls into her room. Some of a businessman has told me that when he was a child, he was taken on the crafts. And actually, he's African American, but he said he was on the crafts with kids of all races, and they were there playing in this room. And he just distinctly remembers that there was no corners in the room. The room was perfectly round, and the whole room was lit, but there wasn't a light source. It just seemed to emanate from every surface. That was the most the aspect of his experience that was most memorable, that this room is perfectly round. The walls met the benches, and the wall curved into the bench, and the bench curved down into the floor. But he said he was in there with many other children, and he said that they were playing with what seemed to be hybrids.
How about that? How about the messages and motivation of the reasons that these so-called abductions happen? Is there anything come through on that?
Wow. See, you're getting into even more. I mean, obviously, the whole thing of abductions is controversial.
Yes.
If you get into why they're here, I think that would even be more controversial. But sure. These people believe they're here. They're actually that there's many species. I mean, I talked to different families all over the state. I mean, we have families in the North Carolina mountains. We have families in the Raleigh, in the capital area. We have families along the East Coast. And they all have similar traits and experiences. And funny enough, though, they also describe different types of beings. So the short grays are the most commonly reported one, but there's also people that have the tall grays. One family from a town close by, it's called Winston-Salem. She is a lady in her 50s. She has had UFO sightings and experiences, abductions all her life. Her family, she married a very religious man, and her daughter have had experiences. And the father has convinced the adult children that these are demons. They're of the devil. So these people try to write it off and not talk about it because it's just evil and, of the devil. So they won't talk to me. But the mother has explained that, she's seen these beings since she was a child, and now her 15-year-old son has had experiences. One of his most memorable experiences is when he was in elementary school, or how old are you when you're 10? So 4th or 5th grade. He was sitting in a classroom, and there was an empty seat between him and the window, and he looks beside him, and he sees what looks like a wavy shadow in the shape of a humanoid body sitting in the desk next to him. And at the time, he said, "Mommy, I saw this water person in the chair next to me." And, we talked through this a lot, and it's kind of like from the movie Predator. The alien has this camouflaging. I think DARPA has experimented with metamaterials, the warping of light around an object.
Right.
So it looks wavy. You can see there's something there, but you can't quite make it out. You can only make out the edges because it seems like light is morphing around this shape. Well, this little boy at the time, he said, "I saw one of the water people at the school. It was sitting next to him." So anyway, I get a lot of stories like that.
Right. Wow. One of the things I always think of is if this is really happening to someone, I can't imagine how someone could have a normal life. Do people just pick up the pieces and try to push it away? Or, how could someone have a normal life if that's really happening?
So I feel that one of the best things that we can do for our witnesses is to help integrate this experience into their lives. I have had situations where a grown man is having really scary abduction things happening, and he's got a small child, and his girlfriend has also seen these beings, and they're terrified. They literally stop sleeping because they know when they're asleep, that's when they come. And it's ruined their lives. They went overboard. They were just really got scary. I'm sure that they're headed for a mental breakdown. Then you have people that try to ignore it and say, "I know it's just a dream." And they'll say that, "I know it's just a dream. It's just a dream." They want to write it off. When people come to our meetings, I think they'll feel more comfortable sharing their stories when they hear their neighbors, people who live around them, sharing their own UFO sightings. And, we'll set up these meetings, so we'll go from 1 p.m. till 5 p.m. And at 5 p.m., nobody wants to go home. Everybody wants to sit around and talk more. And after a couple hours of hearing, other people's stories, then we go to dinner. We go to dinner and we'll have a couple drinks, and then people will just kind of open up and share everything. At our last meeting, a woman who's been coming to a few of our meetings, she had been living in Alaska for a while, and she had said that she was living at this apartment complex where, there's a couple hundred people living in apartments, and she and others had seen a craft land between these two apartment buildings. Well, I said, "Look, you need to write down as many details as you can and draw some pictures." I told her that like 6 months ago when I had seen her the first time. And then at this last meeting, she actually had her boyfriend, who is an artist, draw several pictures of the beings that they'd seen, along with this, her building and the shape of the craft that was between the building. So, wow, she went all out. And she's like, "There's more. I have to add to this." And I said, "Look, you need to do more drawings if you can." And at this point, I think she's decided to write a small book about her experience. So, yeah, it's amazing to me how many people are having these experiences. I just feel like most people are not ready to share their story. So we're reaching out to the public and giving them a venue to share these stories.
I've had, it sounded like you had a little intrepidation at first, buying into this, as well as myself. And, when I started doing the show on UFOs, I thought, no, I'm never going to talk to anyone about being abducted. I'm just not going to do that. And then after a while, I talked to people like Travis Walton or someone like that, and I started to think, well, what else would they be doing here? It's kind of like us flying over Alaska and, shooting a polar bear with a tranquilizer gun and going down and, tagging it or whatever. What else could they be doing? Why would they just stop at a flyover? So it's absolutely a possibility.
Absolutely. So I didn't specifically answer your question. What my witnesses are telling me is that there's a variety of reasons. Some are here because they are integrating our species with theirs, partly because they need to introduce new DNA into their race because they've cloned their bodies for millions of years and they've reduced the quality of their bodies. So they need to introduce new DNA.
Pardon me, before we move on from this, are these stories that you've heard more than one person say? And did they hear it actually from the beings?
So, yes. So obviously that's, this is a little fringe, I guess, because unless you've been an investigator, you're not going to get these stories.
Yeah.
You're not going to get these stories unless you talk to hundreds of people and many people who are willing to share these stories with you. It takes a long time to build up a relationship with someone to the point that they're willing to share these things that are incredible or very difficult to believe. Mm-hmm. It's not like they come out and say, hey, I've been taken by aliens and I've visited their ships. No. It doesn't happen in the first week or 2 weeks. I mean, I might go months in talking to a person before they open up and tell me these stories. And, and obviously one of the other big things is everyone says that they are trying to keep us from destroying our planet. They show these these abductees, they show them pictures of our planet being destroyed by us. If you ask me who's the biggest threat, is it the aliens? No. We are the biggest threat to ourselves. Mm-hmm. If we destroy ourselves, then that's the way it has to be, because a species cannot learn by just being told, don't do this. When you tell a child, don't touch the oven, you're going to get burned. What does the child do? He's going to touch the oven, and he's going to burn himself. That's when a child truly learns, oh, I've made a mistake. There's repercussions. I won't do that again. Because you tell a child, don't touch it. They're going to touch it.
Right.
Kind of, so same concept. They can show us where we're heading with us polluting our planet. But it's up to us to make the conscious choice to fix it. They can't fix it for us. That wouldn't help us in long term.
I would think, what's it going to take? What is the burning stove? Is it right now the weather pattern I think is a little weird, but mm-hmm. What would it take till we finally wake up and say, what are we doing? And what type of sacrifices are we willing to make to get things straightened out again?
Yeah, no, I think we'll have to continue, unfortunately, in the route we're currently going. I mean, our climate has to become seriously dangerous to us for us to finally – we have to burn ourselves. We have to burn ourselves for the general human population to say, oh, my God, we made a horrible mistake. We need to fix it now.
Mm-hmm. I agree. A couple of questions that came up earlier that I jotted down here is who would you consider, of those 57 cases you've investigated, who would you consider is the most credible witness, and can you describe the story? Or I'll say one of the most credible. We don't have to say
I'll have to go back to the case I was describing about the high school physics teacher. I talked to him. I talked to the daughter. I've seen the pictures. The wife has now had the wife for years was trying to deny it. This wasn't happening. She'd kind of try to dismiss it. And now she'll wake up and tell her husband that, yes, she has had the dreams. And she'll call it dreams of being on the crafts, being on the metal table, and being submitted to some medical procedure.
Wow.
So I have spoken to the mom, the father, the daughter. The brother is still uncomfortable talking to me about it, but it affects the brother. The brother's also like in his 50s, and his teenage daughters. The same night that they had the scary thing about what sounded like a boom next to the second floor of the house, the visiting teenage girl, like 13, had something really, really scary, said that something happened to the whole family. She saw the whole family in a doctor's room, but that's all that she would be willing to say. Wow. When there's so many people involved, that to me is the most credible cases. Let's say another story is, we'll call him my Raleigh, North Carolina case. The first case that he submitted to us, he said he saw a small being walk through the wall next to his bed, and he was unable to move. And this being stretched open his eye more and injected something into his eyeball. So when I read that, I'm like, my God, this guy's totally crazy. Okay, that's my knee-jerk reaction. And I talked to him, and I said, take the details. When it happened, did anybody see? Nobody saw. Okay, well, I'll log it as unknown or information. That's fine. But then he goes back and he starts sending me pictures of the UFOs he sees, of these things that happen. And then, in these many, I know him now for years. He tells me that his sister in Atlanta has also paranormal experiences. So so to me, I'm having a hard time believing this guy. I mean, is he really seeing these beings? Excuse me. So I call his sister. And she says, yeah, I know about my brother's fascination with UFOs. And I don't know if I necessarily believe. This is what the sister's telling me. And then I said, well, so he was telling me you've had some paranormal experiences. She goes, yeah, I see ghosts. We see ghosts in my house. And this is a divorced woman at the time, she had like a 13-year-old daughter. She says, yeah, I'll see shadows run across my house, run across the room. And she says, my teenage daughter also says she sees little people. She sees what seem to be 3 to 4 foot tall shadows moving around her in her room. And that's when I'm like thinking, oh my God, it sounds like this other case I had in Winston-Salem, and I said, would you say it's looked like a small being that just looked like a shadow? And she goes, wow, I didn't really ever think about that, but yeah, actually that's what it looks like. It looks like the shadow of a small being. And she said, I just assumed they were always ghosts. But when I talked to her, she's like, oh my God, so is my brother's fascination with UFOs actually somehow affecting me and my daughter? So anyway, wow. Those are the kind of correlations that I find across cases. Here's another interesting case that came my way. A woman who described herself named Jenny. She said, I'm a banking executive. She said, I will not give you my true name or my contact information. You'll only get these emails from me. She says, I've had abduction experiences since I was a child. And she says, I am still single. I am a very, very busy executive. I have a boyfriend. And I have not shared with him these abduction cases. And in the email she says, but I have been impregnated. And I knew that it didn't come from the boyfriend, or it was before the boyfriend. And I've gone to the doctor, and she says, congratulations, you're pregnant. And she doesn't say anything. She's like, oh, okay, thank you. And later, around 3 to 4 months down the line, she goes back and she says, you no longer have a fetus. Did you discharge? She says, no, I don't think so. And then she has to go about back to her busy executive life at the banks. But she has said that she's experienced it all her life. She just needed someone to tell. Huh. And unfortunately, she only communicated with me for a few months. And I mean, can you imagine if you're a high-ranking executive at a bank and somebody starts talking about your abductions and you being impregnated and losing a baby? That could have real repercussions in someone's professional life. That person is not going to be comfortable having her case documented anywhere, whether it be MUFON or anywhere else.
Yeah. But
she emailed me about that, and I really, really wish that she would reach out to me, or maybe would meet me in person, because I just don't think that she's the only one. I think there are far more people out there. I think it happens in every town, in every state. I don't think North Carolina is special in any way. I really think this is happening everywhere.
Well, I'll tell you, it's if it is so, it's just a scary situation, and I understand what you're saying. I mean, if someone is emailing you, it does not, it could be BS, as someone said on the message board. It's
sure.
Very, but when you see them face to face, you can make your judgment. If
Absolutely.
Possible. But I totally understand if someone is actually a bank exec. Of course they're not going to tell anyone about this type of situation.
Sure.
And I can't imagine what type of turmoil it would be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and see, you know what? I am totally okay with anybody saying it's BS. I firmly understand where you're coming from. I got into MUFON because I wasn't ready to accept it. I couldn't accept it. I needed to meet these people. I needed to see it with my own eyes. So let me tell you what happened on November 5th, 2011 at 9:30 p.m. One of these cases had been reporting seeing the UFOs frequently. They were experiencers. It affected the wife. It affected the husband and the grown daughter and the teenage grandchildren. So we had a MUFON meeting in Hickory, North Carolina. And after the meeting, we went to this person's house. I set up my infrared. I set up my telescope. I had a camera on my chest. Other people had their video camera. And it was cold that night. It was really, really cold. There was 12 of us who had started out outside. And six of the people went inside. At 9:30 at night, one of the witnesses said, "Oh my God, look up." And we saw a boomerang-shaped craft, maybe we'll say right around 5,000 feet up. Mm-hmm. So it's really low. I would say it was the size of between the size of once to twice the size of a 747. And we saw the craft cross a quarter of the sky somewhere between 10 and 20 seconds. And the scariest thing, I'm looking at it and I'm not accepting. I'm having trouble processing. What I'm seeing is not supposed to be real. Mm-hmm. I have a camera on my chest and all I did was look at it, my mouth wide open, and I'm watching it. And, I've heard other people say that. I'm thinking, oh, my God, you're full of crap. I would have taken 1,000 pictures. Mm-hmm. When you see something that you cannot process, shock is a real thing.
Right.
Until you're in that situation, you're not going to understand. Because, I had the camera on my chest. I was there with other people. These other people have come to most of the meetings, and they'll say, yep, that's exactly what we saw. As a matter of fact, I've now gone as far as I used a website called tinkercad.com to do a 3D model of the boomerang-shaped craft that we saw. I actually need to get it printed off. But that one event altered my life and made me realize that this is so important. I have to dedicate a small portion of my life to helping people learn that this is a real thing. It affects every one of us.
Now, when this thing was going over, it was dark out, I'm assuming.
Yeah, at 9:30 at night, we had seen the helicopter from the local hospital. We had seen the jets at 35,000 feet. You can clearly hear a jet.
And what about sound on this one?
Nothing. I'm looking at it. I'm staring at it. There's no sound. I'm waiting for sound to come at me. There's no sound. I'm in shock. I'm scared. I'm having difficulty processing what I'm seeing. And there was 6 of us, and we all had equipment there, and nobody got it. Nobody got it. We were all just in shock.
Wow. And any lights on it?
Yep. There was at the end of the boomerang, the lights at the end were orange, and at the front tip there was a larger red light. It's almost like they're large circular objects that were pointing straight down.
Well, it's amazing that you picked that night. Or is this something was this similar to what they were seeing, the witnesses?
They had seen a variety of shapes, the triangles, the disc. I think they even saw a pyramid at one point. I think it had to do. The only reason I saw it is because of the experiences there that were with me. It was not just a family who lived there. It was also another lady who lived in another town. Her cousin, her husband, her autistic child have had experiences, and I think it was because of them. That's why I was fortunate enough to see it. I don't know if you know this, but North Carolina, we have a city called Wilmington, where we have a lot of sightings.
I was just going to ask you about hotspots.
Yes, hotspots. Hotspots. Number one hotspot in North Carolina is Wilmington, North Carolina. It's right on the coast. It is, funny enough, there is a nuclear power plant, Cape Fear. I don't remember exactly the name of the power plant, but it's near Cape Fear. And we also have the largest weapons and ammunition transport in North Carolina that both are really close by. We have so many sightings come from New Hanover as a county. I also see a lot of people on YouTube reporting sightings along that area. There is one particular young man who has gotten lots of videos of the orange orbs there. And he had started to get in touch with another man in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. So it's pretty close by, 45, 50-minute drive between the two cities. Well, they've had a lot of sightings there too. I was in Myrtle Beach on vacation, and I'd already known that there was lots of UFO sightings there, and a lot of people had described the orange orbs coming in from the ocean. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to go check it out. So it was like a Friday. It was Friday, September 30th, 2013, I believe. I taken a lawn chair, took my tripod, took my video camera, and I sat on the beach looking out over the ocean. And I started at 10 o'clock at night. I said, I'm going to stay there till midnight. You know, it's a long shot that I'll see anything, but I'm going to stay. So I was there, and I saw lots of planes go by. I can't say that I saw any satellites, but I did see the planes go by. And so I was there till midnight, and it was kind of getting cold. I'm like, I really kind of was hoping I'd see something. Let me stay another hour. 1 o'clock comes up. I'm like, okay, forget it. I'm really tired. I'm going to go back. So I pack up my tripod. I put the video camera in the bag. I pack up my folding chair, and I start walking towards the parking lot. There is an orange orb, I would say 60 feet off the ground, coming towards the beach at I don't know, I was guessing somewhere between 50 and 60 miles per hour. And it's speeding up, and I'm still on the beach, and it stops almost above me at 60 feet. And the reason I'm saying 60 feet, there is a 3-story house on the beach, and it was about twice the height of that 3-story house. It came up above the beach and did not stop. It did a 90-degree turn and went straight north along the coast without slowing down.
Wow.
So I mean, it's only like 60 to 70 feet is how the closest point it got to me. And I'm looking up at it, and at that point, I'm trying to process as much as possible, and I'm getting the video camera out, and the sighting only lasted 5 to 6 seconds, or maybe 10 seconds. It wasn't enough time for me to get the camera out and on. Mm-hmm. But I can tell you that this object was 4 to 5 feet across. I would describe the outer surface as very glass-like, a dark orange, but towards the center it seemed to be a darker red. It was moving way too fast to be anything like a Chinese lantern. I mean, it was. I'm kind of guessing it was somewhere about 60 miles per hour, and it literally did a 90-degree turn without slowing. So I have now seen the orange orbs that so many people are describing.
Yes, and when I first heard about the orange orbs, the first thing I thought was Chinese lanterns, But when you and other people have described, the moves and the different. I'm trying to think. He was on the show recently. He wrote the book on orange orbs, and he's working with MUFON now. Mm-hmm. Are you familiar with who I'm talking about?
Yeah, I don't remember the name.
Yes. Yeah. But anyway, he had a beach sighting where he was describing that it was like one right after the other, and it had the exact same pattern that it flew, which is really bizarre. And why are they over water so much or toward the water? There's so many questions. If you want to hide, where would be the best place to hide? I mean, that's just speculation, but we do have a lot of sightings from that area, and most of the ones are about people seeing the orange orbs coming in from over the ocean. As a matter of fact, one of my cases in 2014, a person had taken a photo of an object they saw in the very far distance in the middle of the day over the ocean. What was it? Whitesville Beach, somewhere like that in North Carolina. They sent me a picture from their iPhone, and it was very grainy. But he said, "This is a businessman." And I don't know. I mean, to me, I have to give a person with a successful business more credibility. This businessman and his wife went back in the house. They got their binoculars and they looked at this object in the distance, and they said, "Oh my God, that is a UFO, and it is sucking water from the ocean." They sent me the picture, and it's really grainy. I mean, I knew what to expect, so yes, that's what I make out. Can someone say it looks more like a freighter? Sure. Okay, that's fine. I mean, it's grainy. I mean, you can't zoom in. I tried to do some image manipulation, but I couldn't get any more detail out of it. This was a couple of years ago, so the image quality was still kind of poor. But this is what the businessman and his wife told me. They got binoculars, and they said it was a UFO craft, and it was bobbing, so it would tilt, and you could see the sun reflecting off its top surface, and here water was being sucked in through the bottom. Right. That's similar to another case. I forget exactly where, but it was actually in the middle of a lake and sucking water up into it.
Yeah.
Which, of course, they need to have water.
So someone just made a comment about the truck driver. Let me tell you, the truck driver doesn't give a damn what anybody thinks about him. So the truck driver is going to be one of the first people to admit about the UFO sighting. The radio station owner that has reported to MUFON, you're never going to hear about his sighting because he has way too much to lose. His business is all around his credibility. Mm-hmm. His story will not be shared with anyone, but he shared it with MUFON, and we will keep their names anonymous. But we do get sightings from many bankers and business owners. I haven't talked to any doctors, but I'm pretty sure we get sightings from doctors. You have sightings from the full spectrum. And for the people that don't believe, I don't blame you at all. It's going to take you actually seeing it for you to fully understand, the implications that this is real.
Right. Question up there. Is there a commonality to which side that eyes or nose probing implants, or to which nostril they are inset into? Have you heard about any implants in any of these abduction cases?
Yes. We have. Sometimes it's in the shin. Sometimes it's in the ear. But it doesn't seem to be consistent. I have an EMF reader that I take to our meetings. I have not been successful in picking up anything with mine, but someone else who had a really high-end EMF reader did pick up electrical frequencies being given off by somebody's shin. Some of my families that have lifelong experiences chose to invest money into game cameras that they set up inside their homes, and they will also leave on microphones to record the sounds at night. Oh, here's an interesting thing. So I start to tell these people, my families with lifelong experiences, to start documenting and photographing every bruise, every cut that they get. One of my families, she went out and bought a small recorder, and in the middle of the night, she was woken up by some noise, and the recorder went off, and she's talking. She's like, I hear somebody moving. And sure enough, on the recorder, she's like, oh my God, somebody is running across my roof. And you can hear, it sounds like somebody is running. You can't exactly tell it's on the roof, but you can hear footsteps running. Well, in that same night's recording, she got what sounded like clicking sounds from two different people. And when she gave me that audio clip, I was like, wow, that's kind of weird and interesting. And, I didn't think much of it. And then that family was in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Then my family from the mountains, a few months later, also got a microphone. And funny enough, they recorded what sounded like clickings, almost like somebody talking or somebody clicking to someone else. Hello?
Wow. I'm sorry. Like you, I just was distracted by the message board.
All right.
So they actually heard clicking noises, like they were communicating.
It sounded like it was two distinct clicking sounds to each other. Yes, and it came from two families. At that point, I had not introduced the families, but after that, I'm like, look, you two guys need to start talking because you have similar situations going on, and you live half the state away from each other. Did
they actually get in touch with each other?
Oh, yeah, they did.
Wow. Are people hesitant to do that?
Sure. I mean, you think your life is crazy. You don't want to hear about somebody else's crazy life.
But I bet it helps. It's like like a group therapy type of thing to talk about, the fears and
absolutely
anger and all whatever else goes along with it. Which I imagine anger has to be a part of it, I would think.
Absolutely. There's no so like I said, we're giving people a venue to share their stories. It helps them integrate this into their lives, and it's a comfort. it really is a comfort to these people to know that they're not alone. They are not judged by everyone. There is a place where they can share their stories.
Right. One of the things I wanted to ask you with this interview is, what do you think the drones and, again, Chinese lanterns, how do you think they're playing into the amount of sightings that are going on?
Oh, sure. I mean, absolutely. They will be confused. I made sure I did my test. I bought my little Chinese lantern. I lit it with my family, and I recorded it, so I know exactly what it looks like on video camera. And, absolutely, there are some people that are reporting Chinese lanterns, and they were getting confused with a UFO. I think one of my true test for whether it's a Chinese lantern is Chinese lanterns don't make big zigzag moves. And they're kind of slow moving, even with a wind. I mean, if it's at a high altitude, yes, winds do blow in different directions at different altitudes. They still don't zigzag and move up and down. Is there drones? We have a really interesting video. I think it came from Raleigh, North Carolina, of a very, very bright, almost a violet color UFO above looked like a motel. And it was sitting perfectly still, and then it came down behind the motel and then went back up and took off. Could it have been some kind of drone, someone private flying toy? Yes, but there was no sound. You couldn't hear it. The drones the little toy quadricopters that we see are pretty loud. And this thing was so bright. It was an electric violet. It is a very distinct color. I don't think it could have been a drone. Right.
We have about, I'd say we have about 20 minutes, so we've got plenty of time. If anyone would like to call in, that's 603-967-4030. Or if you'd like to engage in asking Israel a question, you can go to the message board at podcastufo.com if you're listening live. So I had another question that came up. I was just trying to find it. I personally saw the other night at the July 4th, I saw, someone put up, I think there was a series of 5 Chinese lanterns. And I think they're pretty easy to tell that they are. For a person who's never seen one, I can understand that.
Sure.
But they seem like they're, it would be hard to confuse them once you know what they are. I'll put it that way.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think it's really important that every investigator go out and buy a Chinese lantern so that you can fully appreciate the differences.
Right.
And I want to say, unless you are talking to these people, obviously I realize the things I'm saying, the things I'm sharing are very far out there. Yep. We have a lot of investigators because these people want to know the truth.
That's right.
And once they start hearing it, they're like, oh, my God, this is real. That's why we have so many.
Hang on just a second. We have a caller on the line. Caller, please say who you are and go ahead and ask your question.
Hello, this is Ken. I'm the one on, right?
Hi, Ken.
Yes.
Hi. I got a question for you. Now, I supplied contractor equipment to all the government bases in Southern California up in the high desert. Some of the things I saw, they were unidentified to me, and I was told in no uncertain terms to not say a word that I even saw it. There was a window left open on top of the JPL on Rocket Site Mountain, and I had to go in and help a contractor build the special equipment they needed for some of their work, which is what I did on a regular basis. Lockheed, Hellendale, China Lake, Adwords, the whole deal. But this thing here, it was hovering about 4 feet off the ground. And electrostatic, my hair was on end. The guy grabbed a hold of me when he saw I saw it and just kept finger to the mouth. Now, there's things I've run into during the course of a job. Now, these can't be they're unidentified to me, but are they actually unidentified flying objects because they're in a military facility? And are they worth reporting?
Caller, thanks for the question. If you continue speaking, could you speak up a little louder? It's really kind of a little bit hard to hear you. Thank you for calling in. And what's your name again, please?
My name is Ken.
Ken, thanks for calling in. Israel, do you have a comment on that?
Sure. No, I do believe that some are American military. As a matter of fact, we have a person, one of my first witnesses was from Virginia, real close to the North Carolina border, that he had video of what looked like a triangular UFO that was being escorted by at least 2 fighter jets, maybe a third. And in this video, he said it literally looked like one of the fighter jets was flying at the front point of the triangular UFO to try to hide it or disguise the shape of this object. The video, I mean, it's obviously really dark. It's really hard to see, but he said that these fighter jets were escorting this triangular UFO. So, yeah, I do believe some of it is American military equipment, but it is so far beyond our current understanding of technology that even that.
This was back in 1989 when I saw this. And at China Lake Naval Weapons ran across the same thing. I had a base sticker. I could go pretty much anywhere until somebody with a machine gun said, halt. And then I know that I was not intentionally lost anymore. I loved looking around these places. But there was something that had fallen off a truck up at China Lake, and I had to help put together some kind of a sling to get underneath it in a certain way because some of the other stuff would kind of push through. And being a distributor for a lot of this product, they had to call us to get it built, then they could use it. It was just rare situations. So there was an object pretty close to that had, been on a... So was it being worked on at China Lake? I don't know. Was it ours? I don't know. But this was back in the 80s. The guy told me a year later, after I prodded him quite a bit, I said, what is that thing? And he said, well, it was part of the Star Wars, he said, that was not supposed to work, and it was involved in counter-rotating magnetic fields, and it projected a hole, and that's as far as he'd go.
Oh, that's really interesting. That is really interesting. Yeah, that's actually one of my witnesses that talked about that.
Yeah, he said it's like a bathtub. It's like your hand in a bathtub. When you move it halfway underneath, everything behind it sucked behind you in the water. And he says this thing, depending on where it aims a hole and where it projects it, is where the thing will go, and the farther the hole is, the faster it travels. And they were all drones at that time, he said, because there's no person that could exist in them.
So I want to share with you what my Raleigh, North Carolina case told me. He said the way that these crafts are propelled is, yes, they are 2 counter-rotating strong magnetic fields. It is literally creating a gravity point in front of them, behind them, and I don't know. I don't think he said anything about how far it was, but I mean, I guess it makes sense. Wherever that gravity point is set, that's where your craft will go. So that's not the first time I've heard about that. That's very interesting.
Exactly the thing that he said. And this was in a hangar. I had to go through the approval to get on top of JPL, sign all this stuff, but it's 30 years ago. And I had to be escorted up, handed off, and I was following the guy, and all of a sudden there was this little porthole thing that was kind of open. I looked inside. This thing's just sitting in there humming and hovering.
Yeah.
And he said it was just I think he said that there was like 80 or 90 of these things around or in orbit right now, and he says we don't have to worry about a blasted thing. He says they'll take care of it.
Interesting story, Ken. Thanks so much for calling in.
Hey, thanks. Enjoy the show.
Thanks.
So let me address one of the questions that came up here. Can you move? Will they follow you? Let me tell you what I told my North Carolina case.
Oh, you're talking about the geographic this is a question. Yes, okay.
So what I told my Asheville, North Carolina case, she has moved from Florida to Georgia to Asheville. And I told her, if they came across from another star system, from another galaxy, you moving 1,000 miles doesn't make any difference. They always find you. And even my Raleigh case, he's moved 3 or 4 times. I'm like, stop moving. That it doesn't help. You can never stop. It will always follow you. It will follow you, and it follows your family.
They would make you think that you'd have to have some type of implant, or how would they, how could they actually know? That's what's so bizarre. And, it's kind of like the more you think you figure out, the more questions there are, really.
Yeah. The implants, yes, that's, what we would naturally assume. There had to be an implant, but who knows? Maybe it's just somehow they can detect there's some kind of biomarker from just your body chemistry.
Well, that's something I never thought of. That's a good question. Do you ever get any reports of orbs that are a UV black light in appearance?
No, not really. I can tell you that I have seen what looks like orbs with the night vision, and I couldn't see it with my own eyes. But that's the only thing. So things are appearing in ultraviolet or in infrared, but are not visible to the naked eye.
Okay. Now, another question up there. As the PR person for MUFON, we all heard Bigelow disaster and Chase Kletsky's fallout with MUFON. I actually didn't hear that, but
I haven't.
So what's going on with MUFON lately?
I really don't care about that. What I'm more concerned about are my witnesses in North Carolina, and that they want to share their stories. That is my number one priority. I do realize that people frequently want to bring up the conspiracy between Bigelow and MUFON. Yeah, I don't care if it's true or not true. All I care about is my witnesses in North Carolina have a story they need to tell and share. And I'm going to document those cases, those sightings.
Well, good enough. Let's see. Peggy wanted to know, she hates when I say her name, sorry Peggy, if you should report a sighting to MUFON even though it's on an Army base. Like, for instance, Ken, who just called in.
Yeah. We do have the sighting reports from around military bases, and they'll specifically say, look, we know what the military crafts look like because we always see them. This was so very different. And Matthew, I got to tell you, if I have to convince you to join MUFON, then don't join MUFON. You have to want to know. You have to want. No, see, that's totally the wrong way to go about it. You need to know the truth. Then you have to find the truth for yourself. Nobody's going to do that for you.
All right. So I don't need to ask you that question.
No. It's up to the individual. It's a personal choice. If you want to write it off, dismiss it out of hand, no problem. If you've seen a craft, you need to have answers. So you need to join MUFON, or just come to the meetings and hear how many of your neighbors are hearing it. I don't care where you live. Your neighbors have had sightings. If you ask your friends and neighbors, you're going to be surprised. One of them has had a UFO sighting.
I am totally surprised. You're right. I've, the subject's come up a number of times where I'll get the courage and I'll finally tell someone in business or whatever, well, hey, I do this show on UFOs, and surprisingly, I would say like half the time, like this business exec, I dared to tell, he all of a sudden said, yeah, my son and I saw something that we just absolutely can't explain, over the water one time. And, so you're right. There's so many people that have had sighting. Now, when I had Seth Shostak on, a couple of years ago, he said, quote, oh, I saw something really strange too. And, I had no idea what it was. And, it ended up being a missile launch. And that's, that's what they are, that type of thing. So he got lucky and he found, a prosaic reason for that. But there's so many that absolutely have no clue. And that's what happened to me, and I told him about my sighting, and it can all be explained according to people like that.
Sure. And so the people who can explain it out of hand have never seen a UFO. That's just what it is. And yes, MUFON has chapters all over the world. We get reports from all over the world. If you can't, I don't know what the chapter situation is like in Australia, but if you can't find one, contact MUFON. Start that chapter. Start a website. Start organizing meetings. I can tell you, the first meeting I organized here in Charlotte, I was scared to death. I thought everybody was going to show up with these foil hats and everyone was going to be crazy. And funniest thing happened. It was actually some professional people that showed up. It was only like 10 people the first meeting, and then 15 showed up the next one, and then 40 showed up the third one, and it just goes from there. Every city that I go to, there are people who've had sightings and experiences.
Wow.
I'm convinced it's not just North Carolina. It has to happen everywhere.
Well, Israel, I want to really thank you very much for being on the show tonight. It's been great. Thanks so much.
Well, I appreciate you having me on.
You bet. And so I want to say, everyone, the show is free to all listeners, not halfway through like usual, and it's in the memory of a great guy that used to be on this show. He was Andy Fleming, and he passed away recently, so the show is in memory of him, and he will be sorely missed. I want to thank everyone for helping out with the show, and I kind of feel a little crazy because I have not thanked Keith in the Dark Matter Radio Network. He's producing the show. Thank everyone else. I always forget you, Keith. Thanks very much. Peggy, thank you for managing the Facebook page. I want to thank our guest, of course, and Alejandro Rojas for the news. This is Martin Willis. We'll see you next week, and with Erica Lukes here on Podcast UFO. Keep your eyes to the sky.